story that really stuck out to me when I was learning some of this quantum consciousness work. It had come from Michael Newton, who did all the life between lives. One lady who was in session, she said, I had this experience, this lifetime where I was in a concentration camp. I knew it was going to be a short lifetime. I'm reviewing my life. They're like, okay, what is it? She goes, well, my life hasn't been as bad as those over there. And I said, who are those people? And she said, the perpetrators that were in these concentration camps. From that perspective, even when we look at the roles whatever perpetrators play, there is a role that it plays. And what do people learn from that? What does that give people the ability to learn? Could people learn forgiveness if there was nothing to forgive people for? Yeah. Could people learn compassion if they didn't have any opportunity? For us to learn, we have to have some experience that facilitates that learning. So how do we say what is good, bad, right, wrong, otherwise, right? It comes back to that everything is perfect. It might not feel perfect at the moment, but there's always that higher purpose.
Welcome to the Always With Me podcast. I'm your host, Fiona Redding, and together we are going to journey into the heart of the human experience through conversations exploring faith, purpose, and our spiritual growth, what it means for us, how it has shaped and transformed us, and what we have discovered, bringing hope and encouragement for you, wherever you find yourself right now and whatever is going on in the world around. This is a show embracing the truth that we are never alone, and that even in our darkest moments, there is a guiding light that leads us home. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Hey, and welcome back to this episode of the Always With Me podcast. Today, I am delighted to be joined on the show by Toni Everard. So Toni is an award-winning business and mindset coach, trainer, mentor, and podcaster who is obsessed with the power of the mind and communication and helping people make a positive change in their life and business. She works with entrepreneurs, business owners, coaches, and practitioners, empowering them to stand out as the go-to authority in their field, know their worth, have the confidence to share their unique message with the world, and ensure that their business supports an abundant life. When she's not focused on helping people launch into their genius zone, you can find her traveling from one beach location to the next with her partner, cracking mum jokes with her adult daughter, and hanging out at a local yoga studio. So welcome to the show, Toni.
Thanks, Fiona. It's so great to be here. I'm so excited because I feel like we have these conversations that just drop in every year or so, and it's been a while in the making. So I'm really excited to be here and having this chat with you today.
Yeah, me too. So just for the context for our listeners, so Toni and I connected years ago, I think through the Business Addicts podcast.
Correct. Yeah.
And we actually connected in real life at ProBlogger.
Yes.
Like that was 2016 or something like that. And we at that point connected, and we've actually sort of our journeys in business have really intersected a lot along the way. Toni, you were involved with the Happiness Hunter Walk in Adelaide. We've worked together. We've been on each other's podcasts. I think you came on a Happiness Hunter retreat. So we have I stayed with you when we launched the walk in Adelaide.
Yes.
We do actually have a really deep connection,
Yeah.
even though we don't actually really connect very often. There's a real, I think, soft spot, for each other. Really,
yes.
There's a deep connection there.
There is, Fiona, and sometimes it's the really quirky little things that you remember. Like my partner is FIFO at the moment, so I drive to the airport and back all the time. And there's a roundabout when you're leaving the airport that so many times when I come through it, I remember when I picked you up from the airport and I went the wrong way. Like I was just so busy talking to you that I went the wrong way. And it just sits in my mind for some reason. And I can remember making you a bowl of porridge for breakfast. And we sat there and we ate porridge with blueberries and stuff before we went and did the walk. And it's really, it always fascinates me, these little moments that, you just, that hold there and are part of that connection with people.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I don't remember the porridge and the blueberries. It's just, isn't that funny though? I mean, there's a really classic case in point. I mean, around the whole mindset of memory and that sort of thing is that we all have different recollections of things.
Mm.
We're all there at the same time, but what you were experiencing, what I was experiencing, and what you remembered and what I remembered were not the same thing. It's fascinating. But anyway, we've got you to come on the show today. So I just am kind of just getting the little taps on the shoulder, and I reach out to whoever I'm getting tapped on the shoulder to reach out to, and Toni's name popped up. So you also did mention that I think that you've a little bit of a, I don't know, when I asked the question around what you were doing, is that I guess spirituality is playing a bigger role in your life and business now.
Yes.
So I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to too many episodes of the podcast, but each episode's completely different and there's not like a set formula that we go along with this. But I'm really curious for you just to sort of start sharing about your journey or your experience with that.
Yeah, absolutely, Fiona. And I guess it's really interesting because when I look back, because I have been listening to a few episodes actually, I tuned into Julie Parker's episode, Kerry Gravina, is that how you say them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was listening to them, and I really love hearing other people's experience of spirituality and, connection and what that means. And, for me, when I was young, my family weren't religious at all. Like I knew that when my nana lived in the UK, they were involved in the church, like it was a thing to do. It was like Church of England. And one of my cousins was involved in church, but it wasn't really like a thing in my family. And in fact, I had this really strange things because one of my best friends at school, her family went to church every weekend. So if I stayed at their house on the weekend, I would go to church with them on Sundays. And it was always this thing because, there'd be these different teachers there. And, I went to school in the country. So it was a lot more community sort of thing. And I had this really weird thing when I was young that if I was in church, I would get this almost uncontrollable urge to laugh. It was really intense. And I never really knew what it was. And I've reflected on this at different times throughout my life. And I was thinking about this just after listening to one of these episodes recently, actually, and I thought, I think it might have been the energy inside the church that was just like a higher frequency that just brought up this kind of higher frequency emotion in me. But it come out as like I wanted to laugh, and it was a little bit inappropriate, and I felt a little bit weird about it, but I couldn't quite work out what it was. And I never really considered that and until, like more recent times. And I think, especially over the last couple of years, I've got quite deep into spirituality and esoteric sort of studies and, the different ways of thinking from different parts of the world and how they all tune in together, and a lot of the similarities that come across all of these different kinds of practices. And when I think about, because a lot of my journey getting into personal development was that I got to a point in my life where I knew I was the problem.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't point the finger of blame anymore, and I had to do something about myself. And in that process, yes, I learned how to do a lot of work on myself. But now in reflection, I look back and I think I always feel like for everything that has happened, because I'm a bit of a like unicorn or a bit of a different kind of person from the rest of my family, I guess, in the path that I've taken. And I always felt like I used to refer to it as, oh, I was the golden child, like I was the baby of the family and I was the girl and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like I was always like divinely guided in some way, because for some of the situations that I got myself into and the things that I used to do and where I used to hang out, my life could have been a whole lot worse.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I was somehow always a little bit divinely guided or looked after, or, there was something else there that kept me moving towards a safer path or a more positive sort of path. And then, like I said, in the last couple of years, well, actually, it was probably 2017 when I had one of the biggest experiences. And that's when I started doing some work that was called ultimate consciousness, or quantum consciousness, it was this one. And I did this process where I connected to something much greater than myself. And I remember just having these tears, and they weren't like tears. I'd done lots of emotional clearing. They weren't tears like that, but it was tears of like relief, and belonging. Like I finally got this sense that I belong in the world, right? That I belong to, like I have a space in the world. Like it's okay for me to take up a space. Like I belong. And it was the most powerful experience that I've ever had in that way. And I think from there, I just continued to seek more of that sort of connection. Like, it's good. I can do the coaching and I can do all the mindset work, but there's something more, and I think that's where it really started.
It's really interesting that you say that, because like I guess the idea for this podcast really came, like I've it's a narrow path, a spiritual path, right? And I was really kind of like, not that I was going the wrong way, like I obviously am a mindset, really focused on mindset, study metaphysics, universal laws, the application of them, living them, breathing them. And there was something that I was really felt that I was missing such a significant piece of the puzzle by not the puzzle, the picture, by not talking more openly about the spiritual aspect of it. And, that is actually the foundation for everything, because that sense of being part of something bigger than us transcends mindset, right? Mindset's just the kind of, the practices, the tools of mindset are just the practices to be able to help you experience that, remember that, become that, be that. And that I just, when you wrote in the show notes and in the message that you've sent me, and, what you've just talked about then, I just think it is, that's what we're all seeking, right? Is that sense of belonging. It's not actually necessarily about succeeding in the material world or any of those things, because they're transient, they don't last. And what you were saying about how, obviously you've been learning or studying or whatever, or being mentored or just reading books or listening to or whatever, different teachers, philosophers, spiritual teachers, guides, stoics, whatever. It's actually all the same thing. It's just presented in a different way, or a person's way of understanding it, and they relate that back to the world in whatever way they do. But when you actually do look at all of these different ways of explaining it, understanding it, explaining something that can't be explained, they actually all do have at their essence the exact same thing.
Yes. Yeah, they do. 100%, 100%. And it's so fascinating, because I recently, part of the studies that I've done was learning about the ancient ways of the Hawaiians. So the practice of huna. So in ancient, and even when you look at the history of Hawaii, because, if you go back, there was a period of time where a lot of the ancient teachings in different cultures around the world all got a bit overtaken and, went off in different ways. But there was specifically a part of Huna teachings that kind of went underground for a while, but managed to resurface through the history of, different things that happened with, the different people that landed in Hawaii and the different ways of things that they wanted to teach and whatever. But some of these teachings resurfaced and come back out, because they were always, rather than being written teachings, they were oral teachings, right? So they were passed on orally. And so I recently was teaching Huna, and it's really getting, they are such spiritual practices in really understanding. And the really interesting thing is, like, you see this trilogy in a lot of things, right? So whether it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, the conscious mind, the unconscious mind, and the higher conscious mind, like, you see this kind of, and even if you look into like Egyptian, they had like a lot of these, like the three gods, Isis, something, I can't remember what they are now, but like in all these different practices, it comes back to this trilogy and these ways of thinking, that of how we are connected as human, and like, who are we really? Like, we're really this consciousness living in this human form, and how are we expressing that consciousness through us in this lifetime? How are we doing that? And I think that, and I'm deeply connected to this, both from a personal evolution perspective, but also with business, because I really believe that in business is like a higher form of serving. So how do you help more people, right? Because the business purpose of business, if you go high enough chunk, it's to make money, but essentially otherwise you've got a charity or whatever else, not for profit. But it's to solve problems for people, right? It's to help people. So essentially the more you're helping, the more successful your business is. And the thing though that I find is that I love working with people who are so drawn into business because they want to make a different impact on the world. So yes, I work with a lot of coaches and practitioners and therapists and that space. Of course, they do beautiful things with people. But I've even got clients, like one of my clients is in irrigation. He's got a big business. It's turning over like 20 million plus or whatever, different businesses in the irrigation, fertilizer type stuff. But at the core of it, he wants to have a positive impact on his staff. He wants to be a role model for his staff. He wants to change the industry so that it's more green for the planet. Like there's so
There's
much.
higher motive, higher purpose to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love seeing now, and I'm really passionate, is that for people even bringing this into business so that, you realize that your business is here for a higher purpose, and it's consciousness streaming through that way as well. So yeah, there's so much of it is just coming into my world these days, Fiona, and it really, like, I get such a sense of fulfillment for this work when I bring in that spiritual aspect. Mm.
So, do you talk with your clients as overtly as you are with me now, and have you always, or is this something that you're now starting to draw in more? Like, have you experienced a shift yourself with that in terms of, I mean, let's call it, if you want to call it, like coming out of the spiritual closet or something like that? Like, are you finding, because that's certainly something I'm aware of, is that it's not that I don't care, it's like I cannot not talk about this anymore. If that makes sense. It's like, it's such a compelling, it's like I'm being propelled forward with it. It's like there is no way that I cannot talk about it. And one of the things that was really fascinating for me, just before I throw back to you, was I was a bit worried before I started this podcast. Like one of my, in my head was, it's potentially going to have a negative impact on your business. People are going to think you are, a religious nut or whatever. Fascinatingly, it's had the opposite effect. And since I've launched this podcast, things have shifted and moved in ways that are beyond logical reasoning.
Yeah. Fiona, it's such an interesting question, and it's definitely developed over time, because as a coach as well, that as you develop and grow, that's who you work with and how you work with people develops and grows as well. And I 100% am certain that people are attracted. It's like it's a vibrational frequency of who comes and works with me. So as a master trainer of NLP and all those kinds of things, I've got a very keen understanding of where people are in their thinking and their values levels of thinking, and what they relate to, because how people express this part of themselves will vary depending on their evolution of thinking, right? So I'm pretty good at picking up at where people are, and I always attempt to communicate it, I guess, in a way that's going to be a match for where their thinking is. But I think the thing is that what people resonate with and why this hits the mark is that at a deep core level, people know that it's the truth.
Because the truth never changes.
Yeah. And it resonates with them, right? And, I can really relate to you, like when you were saying about, having this fear about speaking or whatever. A couple of years ago, I did this deeply intense, it was called an accelerated personal evolution program. And it was 7 days. I had to go and stay at a hotel and like be by myself. It was online, I was doing it, but I had to go and stay at this hotel. And it was very deeply spiritual work. And, it was incredible. And it was for the purpose of really finding some of that deep stuff that was unconscious, to kind of bring it to the surface And you need to be pretty brave for that. I know you've had some of these experiences as well, Fiona. But in that process, like one of the things, I've had a history, like I used to be like petrified of public speaking, absolutely petrified. Like I can remember when I worked as an assistant accountant, I remember we used to get these ridiculous awards in our work every month, and one was called the Best Groomed Award, and it's because we worked in hospitality, so grooming was important. I worked in finance, right, in the accounts team, but I would get nominated for this Best Groomed Award. And I remember winning it this month, and my general manager is presenting this in front of like my rest of my colleagues, and like I was so uncomfortable being in front of people and being the center of attention like that. I used to like not want to hold on to pieces of paper because that would make it really easy for people to see how much I'm shaking. And I go red and my words, and like my throat would really close up. And so anyway, I was on this deep personal evolution program. And of course, we're really going to find all this sort of stuff. And I was like, I could not speak, right? I was like, I can't get the words out. And my mentor there, she said, what is it that's unspeakable, right? Yeah, what is it that's unspeakable? And we were doing these processes, and part of it was like I couldn't say what I wanted to say to someone in my family. But another part of it, she said, does this affect any other context of your life? And just straight off the bat, I said spirituality, right? Like that there was this block in me being able to speak about spirituality. And so, even reflecting on that, I mean, before that, I used to, I just loved a bit of woo-woo stuff, and I've had cards and all different things for a long, long time. But I think since that time, I think I've probably started speaking more about it. And I just bring it in, it's just normal conversation. And I think because of the studies I've done and the understanding of quantum physics and the different sort of, not that I've got a huge understanding of religions, but even just like the different, modes of thinking from throughout history, I usually find ways that I can, because I think there's a very thin veil between science and spirituality. Right. So I can usually find ways to, like, I'm quite pragmatic. So I can usually find ways to explain things that is, it's, yes, there's faith in it. And there's stuff that you just, you can't explain, but there's always ways that you can explain things as well. And I think just one other thing on that, like I remember I was at an event and a person there that I know asked me something about what I'd been doing or something. And I told her about some stuff about like planets and energies and stuff. And she started going, oh, that's a whole lot of rubbish, right? Like fully rejected it. And I just said, you know what? It's okay. You don't have to believe it.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't have to, I'm not here to convince you. I'm not here to convince you. Like, that's okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been an interesting kind of process, I think, and how that's weaved in.
So when you were talking, actually, one of the things that like my teachers have said to me several times over the years, like, it's just a tool. It's just a tool. And it is helpful for me actually a lot of the time. So if you think about something like religion, it's just a tool to help us remember who we are, that teaches us practices. It focuses our attention. It teaches us how to be part of a community, that sense of belonging, loving and caring, looking out for each other, being a decent human being, basically working from your heart, right? And when you're working from your heart and you're outside and you're being, there's a selflessness with it. And there can, as you were saying before, like there can be a real selflessness in business as well. Because at the end of the day, we still have to, like, we live in an environment where we need money to be able to feed ourselves and to be able to do good work in the world and be generous and philanthropic and support people and to care for people that are less, fortunate than us. There's a need for that. Like, we need money for that. And business is this incredible vehicle for people to be able to express themselves and to be able to provide for that as well. But I just think, if people are really struggling with a lot of this stuff, like forgiveness or a ho'oponopono, it's a tool to help you release grievances. And as you release grievances, you let go of guilt, you let go of holding everybody else around you to judgment and, to blame for everything. It's like these practices are simply tools to help us remember who we are and to reconnect as that consciousness, that we
Yes.
are, they say me and the Father are one. Like we are one with our Creator, whatever, however we want to think of that, if that's God or that's Jesus or that's Buddha or that's, the Buddhists don't believe in God, but do you know what I mean? It's like that real sense of belonging to something, to being part of something, not there's no separation with that, but those tools, those practices help us remember that, reconnect with that, because we're never not connected from it. We just feel like we think we are disconnected from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is the thing. And I think, especially things like religion, when you look at the structure of how religion is structured, it provides really good framework for people. So, sometimes, and this is why, like, people come into religion for all different reasons, but this is why you'll sometimes see people that have been in prison then, go to religion, because people that have ended up in prison, that they've often had a lot of chaos in their life. They're living kind of moment to moment. They're very impulsive, and there can be a lot of chaos and stuff that happens, right? And then when people get smacked down from that, right? Like thinking that they can get away and there's no consequences and whatever, they get to a point where part of their evolution is, there's got to be something greater here for me. Right? And that's where religion serves a really powerful purpose of creating that structure and a way of being, that I know if I do these things, I'm going to have something I can be certain about, and it creates that certainty. And, when we think about, even like from a masculine feminine sort of perspective, structure is very masculine, right? So it gives us, when we've got good structure in our lives, and especially for women, if we've got good structure in our lives, that means that structure holds us in like a masculine holds us, so that we can bring forth our feminine as well. So we're more free to be ourselves and to express and to be more in our natural state, because we've got the structure around us that holds us as well. So there's so much to, whether it's religion or spirituality, that serves such incredible purpose, for people in their lives.
I 100% agree with that. Like, just that sense of almost anchoring and grounding in that there's something that you can hold on to in a world that sometimes there is nothing to hold on to there. And that's faith, right? That's what faith is. It's holding on to something that defies logic, that transcends anything that tangible that you can see, feel, taste or touch, like it's a something within you that you have to kind of develop and nurture and allow yourself to experience. And it's very easy, and I know I was completely closed off to it for a really long time, and it was only kind of really by accident that it kind of opened up for me. Not accident. And I think that too is part of, probably similarly for you as well, I think that's part of the evolution, or I don't want to say maturity, because I don't want to assume that, but there is a maturing with it as well, like with the whole process of uncovering that. I think at the start it's just this, oh my gosh, there's this whole other world out there that I didn't, or inside of me that I didn't know about. And then you do go down a pretty dark path, to be able to fully experience the light, and that does take a lot of courage to do that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, though. I think you're right, though, when you were saying like maturity to a certain extent, because if we think about like I talk about as the evolution of consciousness, but even through as children, right? When you look at kids, and I talk about the terrible twos and things like that, like when, kids, they say that some of the most violent humans on earth are like 2 and 3-year-olds, right? Because they don't care. They'll just do whatever, because they don't really understand. But it's that maturing where they become less egocentric, like it's less about me. And then I can accept that there's more than me, like that there's more than this that happens. And that evolution doesn't happen just naturally, like it's very environment driven. So there's people that don't get that opportunity necessarily to evolve, through those different sort of levels. But yeah, it is, and it's that personal evolution as well. But and I think the big thing for this, Fiona, as well, is that what's really interesting is, I think every level, though, of evolution that people go through, there can be different sorts of judgment, right? So like judgment about, well, they shouldn't be doing that, or, or if they're not spiritual, then, they're so behind or whatever else. And I think, like, I know for myself, when I first started doing work on myself and I first went home, and not like I wasn't living at home, but went back and spoke to my parents individually because they're separated. But I remember just going, oh my God, like, I can, it was so clear where all my baggage had come from, right? And listening to them talk and all this kind of stuff. And for a while, I had to really limit the amount of time that I could spend with my parents listening to how like they spoke, because I had shifted so much that I couldn't relate to them anymore. And I had all this, oh my God, they should be doing personal development, and they've got so much baggage and da da da. And then I realized that that judgment is just means that I've got more to learn and grow, right?
Correct.
Because, ultimately, when you get to that, like I often say, and I say, this to people that I coach and mentor as well, it's like, I always say to myself, I'm not God, right? Like, I'm not here to know what the purpose of their life is, or what path they're on, or what they're doing, or how do I even know what's right for them? All I know is what's right for me. And I think, that's part of that
Maturing.
spiritual and maturing. Yeah. Yeah.
We call it spiritual superiority. And I remember when I read this term, and when you feel like you've been punched in the face, I was just like, oh. And I'm like, oh, but then, I think that is part of it as well. Is actually you do have to look at your darkness and your weaknesses, and that is the process. And we can all get stuck at a stage, right? And we can get stuck
Yeah.
at stages for ages, and then finally we crack through. And other times it doesn't
Yeah.
even hit us, But that idea of the judgment can become so intense after you've had an awakening of some sort. But I don't think it is more intense. I think there's an awareness to it, right? So it's been able to kind of move through these new levels of awareness of actually how you operate and how you think without judgment of yourself. So there's,
Yeah.
you need to learn how to be compassionate towards yourself. And as you do that, you learn naturally how to be more compassionate to other people. So actually, we haven't released it yet. I had a really great conversation with Bernadette Doyle. I'm not quite sure when her episode will be going live, around that idea of like, where there is judgment, there is no love, and where there is love, there is no judgment. And that we can, even as we kind of evolve through the new levels of understanding and awarenesses, to actually not sit in judgment, or that I'm more spiritual or I've got more awareness, because actually that means you've got less in a
Yes.
way. And it's so like, because the ego can hook into anything. The ego can hook into anything. So there's a different level of vigilance, I think, that's required as you start to progress along the path, because we can still convince ourselves of anything.
Yeah. This is such a great point, Fiona. And I think that I was just talking to one of my groups about this the other day, actually. It's that knowing, because I can remember, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure you've had similar experiences. But I remember crying to my coach going, oh my God, when will I ever get rid of all my stuff?
Yeah.
Right? Like, as if there was this place that I was going to get to where, like, I'm just like, ta-da, everything's just amazing all the time. And of course, we know as long as we're alive, we're going to go through challenges and experiences and things like that. And we are, we can never be fully conscious of everything. Like, there's always going to be stuff that we're unconscious of, because like, your human mind cannot be aware of everything consciously anyway. It's just not designed to do that. So of course, there's always going to be new things that you learn. There's going to be new experiences that you have. There's going to be new environments that you're going to be in. There's going to be new people that you meet, that right now you will be unconscious about aspects of whatever that is, and how you're going to fit in there, and what that's going to show for you, or anything else. So, I think that, and I think that's the humbleness in it, right? It's just knowing that, yes, I'm always working on myself. And yes, I always know that there's going to be more that I'm going to learn. Like, I'm going to become more conscious of myself and other things as I go along. And wherever anyone else is, it's just where they're at, like, there would have been a time when people were looking at me going, geez, Toni needs to pull her head in and sort herself out, right?
Yeah. But see, now you've done it. Everybody else is supposed to have done it too. Like, I've got it. And yeah, there is so much in that. And what you said before about that humility, I think is really the key word. Is that it's like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, like the less you know. And so when you are like in the first flush of, there's, I understand everything. I understand everything. But let me go and sit and judge every single other person because they don't. It's like being able to catch yourself in that. And the other thing I really loved what you said, Toni, I really loved it, is that you're not here to give people their life purpose. You're not here to tell people what they should or shouldn't be doing, or how they should or shouldn't be feeling, or what they are or are not thinking. And I think that's something that is powerful, because like that's kind of the way I see it in my work as well. Like I'm just here as a guide for wherever people are at. And as you said before, like, depending on where we're actually at vibrationally is going to attract or repel the people that we're meant to work with. And just the more I'm going along, I'm just like, I'm just here to share what I've learned. Like it's almost like I'm not even here to teach. Like I thought I was here to teach, and I'm like, oh no, I don't even think I'm here to do that. I think I'm just here to just go about living my life, sharing the experiences that I have, and allowing people to take from that what they will. And really that's what this show is about as well. It's like, I'm not here to be the guru or the expert or the enlightened one or the one that's got necessarily any idea what's going on. It's like, this is just a space to have a conversation with other people about this. That's to me, it feels like freedom and liberation, because previously I think I've felt like I needed to be the expert. And I just don't have any need to prove that or to be that. Like, it's like the only person I need to prove anything really to is myself.
Yeah.
And there's such a freedom in that.
Yeah. Fiona, I think you're bang on there. And I think, that's a similar, I can relate to that. And especially being like an NLP trainer, right? And then an NLP master trainer. It's like, well, I know all about how it works and I'm like, no. But what I really love, I think, what was sort of popping to mind for me through that is that whole getting away from the separation. And this ties into like the belonging and everything as well, is realizing like I know when I'm working with someone that then we're not separate. Well, it's like, yes, we're separate and we're not, right? Like they are still part of my projection. They are still part of like whatever I'm helping them with is helping me to evolve. Like I've said for a long time, I get paid for my own therapy, because you can't, like, as far as projection goes, if someone is in your reality with a particular problem and you help them solve it, you then help you solve that for yourself, right? Like it's
the giving and receiving. It's like you give, you receive, you give. Like it's and you're just two aspects of the same consciousness. Experiencing yourself as consciousnness through the lens of whatever.
Absolutely.
Quite so powerful, right?
It is. It's amazing. Like I and this is one of the things that I haven't had to say it to my clients for a while, but I used to get people say to me, it must clearly part of my projection, is to say, oh, please don't judge me. And I'm like, and like, because people share quite, intimate things, and when you're coaching and that sort of thing. And I'm like, you know what? Like I have got no desire to judge you. It doesn't, I know you are an amazing, incredible being, and that there's just some limitations here that have been hanging around that you want to shift. Like I don't have, there's no purpose in me judging that. Like I don't see things like
through
other
that
people
lens.
see. And it's recognizing, like I recognize in every other person, especially, like it's much easier to do when you work with people in a really close way and they're sharing a lot of things, but I can recognize the capability of my any kind of behavior or thought pattern within myself, that anyone else has. And it's like, I've got the capability of that. I might not do it, but I've got the capability of it. I can recognize that we're not separate.
One of the things you've heard me say this before, like the thing is not the thing you think is the thing is never the thing. And that's been really powerful for me over the years because I used to look at people sometimes and I'd go, I don't understand what your problem is. Like, why have you got a problem? There's no problem there. Like, and it took me a long time to kind of recognize it's like, yeah, I don't have a problem with that particular thing, but I've got a problem over here with a thing that they don't have a problem with. And it's like, so I can just accept that they've got that problem with that. And that's okay because I understand how tricky it is over here with this thing that I'm struggling with and not able to let go of.
Yeah.
And that was like this great leveler. It was just like, just because something's not a problem for me and it doesn't make sense to me, I can't understand it. It's not my job to understand it. They've got a different program than me. And I can just accept that. It enables them to it softens it for people, but it softens it for you too, because you're giving them grace. You're extending that to them. You're naturally, as you give receive, right? You're getting that back.
Absolutely.
You're giving it to yourself.
Yeah. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's just an energetic pattern that they're running.
Yeah.
And you're running energetic patterns, like the whole details of the who and the what and the why, like, it's irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're just a bunch of programs talking to a bunch of programs, and it doesn't, and the programs don't understand each other, and then they get in a fight because they're not talking the same program. And it's like when you can kind of allow yourself to see beyond that. But I think the real test for all of us, it's easy to see that and to have this discussion now while we're feeling good.
Yes.
But put us into the the environment where we are being challenged and our ego is being pushed and we are reacting. It's not the same, like that's where all of the effort that is put in and the conscious practice and the vigilance is put in through all of the times, we hope will stand us in better stead during those moments when we do massively react or are triggered or buttons are pushed.
100%, Fiona. I think it is, like you said, it's so easy to have these great philosophical, I'm stuck on that word now as well.
Yeah,
philosophical
philosophical
conversations. But it's like when the rubber actually hits the road, right? When you're having those things. And, like definitely in this last 12 months, I've had some pretty major stuff that's happened in my own family, like in my, close childhood family. And I can remember at time going, how is this my life now? Like, how did this get to this point, right? This is not how it's not like there's been crazy stuff in my family as far as divorces and like a little bit of mental health stuff, but like some really intense stuff happened in this last 12 months. And a good friend of mine said, she goes, it isn't your life, it's their life. And, so that was good to get some separation from that. But in those moments to be able to go, you know what, I'm okay. I'm okay right now in this moment. Yes, there's things that are happening that I never wanted to deal with and didn't want to face and whatever else. There's boundaries I had to put in place or things that I had to say that I didn't want to say, all of that kind of stuff. But in that moment, I could create that. It's almost like I think about it sometimes as being the observer, right? So I'm going, okay, Toni's having this human experience with these people and this is what's happening, but it's everything's okay, right? And I guess again it comes to a bit of that, having that faith, but being able to sometimes I think about it as well as being able to zoom out. I literally imagine zooming out, like if I was zooming out from the world, and then that intense thing that when you're right into it seems massively intense, but when you zoom right out, it's just amongst the sea of everything else that's happening on the planet. But bringing that practice in, and it's not like I don't do it perfectly. Like I still go through, well, I do it perfectly, right? Because I do it. It's perfect however it happens. But I still feel the emotions. But I think it's the difference now in how I work through those emotions. Yeah.
And you are not it. Like you are, there is a sense of not being all consumed by that.
Yes. Yeah. Even in I had a instance of food poisoning a little while ago. And I haven't been sick. I don't generally get sick. Like if I start feeling myself get sick, I'm like, must be a bit run down, look after myself better. It's all good. But I got this food poisoning. And I remember even going in the bathroom. I won't go into description because it wasn't pretty. But I remember just sitting there going, you know what? I can be okay in this moment.
Yeah.
Like I can be okay in this moment as well, because mine wants to go, oh, this is terrible. And I feel so bad. Oh my God, what's going to happen? Or maybe I need to go to hospital. I'm like, no, I'm okay in this moment. So yeah, there's always opportunities of where you can be reminded of your own spirituality and your own power and that sort of faith of you've got everything that you need to be a human.
There's two things I want to say on that. Thanks for sharing. I can really relate to a family experience this year because I had one of those as well, where I was just like, what is going on here? And it was like, okay, but I can be okay in this. Like, there is great good that's happening through this experience, and being able to actually apply all of my practices. And like you, like, I didn't do it perfectly. I really did have a couple of days where it wasn't great, but honestly, it was a day where I wasn't okay. It wasn't the whole experience. It was just like, okay, I can give myself the grace. I'm going to allow myself to experience this emotion today. That's okay. But tomorrow's a new day and we can get up and deal with it differently. But as you were talking about that sense of like the zooming out observer, a couple of years ago, I had this, it was a very strange experience. And it was actually the start of when I went really down after this. It was like my whole system crashed. And a girlfriend of mine, really, really good girlfriend of mine, there was a court case. It was, I won't go into the details, but it was like her husband was her and her husband. It was really serious, like really serious. Anyway, she asked me to come to and be her support person. She goes, it's going to be one afternoon. And anyway, this case ended up being 4 days, right? So I just went every day as their support person. She had a whole lot of support people. Anyway, I had this experience where I was really trying to apply my metaphysical brain to it, like actually like my metaphysical mind to it, like just not judging and stuff. But I was like, I can't even explain it to you. It wasn't like I was above my body or anything like that, but I was in this room, but not in this room. Like it was like I was in this room as an observer. And okay, so we had the judge up the front, right? And the judge was telling people to spit their chewing gum out, and the judge was in charge. I'd never been in a courtroom before, right? It was the judge's room, and every single person in that room was under the jurisdiction of that judge, right? Whether you were like spit out your chewing gum, like someone was sitting there and she goes, you have to spit out your gum. Don't know gum in my courtroom. And it was like, we were just like, holy shit, what just happened then?
Like Judge Judy, yeah.
Yeah. Like it was full on. And anyway, so then I just had this experience, right? So I had him and his family sitting just in front of me, and anyway, but there was my girlfriend, there was her family, there was her friends and support him, there was him, so he was the, what do you call it, the defendant. Yeah. There was his mum and dad were there. I think his sister was there. There was the barristers for both sides. There was the court stenographer. There was the security guards. There was the journalists, like, because it was a big case. It was like press there and stuff.
Wow.
Anyway, I sat there, and I mean, I was there to support my friend and her daughters, and I just had this other out of body experience, and I was just like, at any point in time, any of us in this room could be sitting in any of those seats. Right? I was like, I just happened to be here as my friend support person, but I could be the defendant, I could be the victim, I could be the journalist, I could be the security guard. And there's only one person in that room who has any right to make a judgment. So like, even things were being dismissed. So there was, the prosecution would put something forward and the defense would defend against it, and it would be inadmissible as evidence. It couldn't be considered as evidence. And it was like, because the evidence had to be so strong for the judge to consider it, right? She wasn't just going, oh yeah, hearsay and hear that. And, you used to hear about, throw the book at them. It's like, it doesn't work like that. And it was such a complex process to go through to make a judgment as to, in the end, he ended up going to jail for 3 years. Like, it was serious.
Wow. Yeah.
But even that, like, could have been less or could have been more, but it had to be weighted on. And then there was precedent, and then there was all of this stuff. And I'm like, we could have, any of us, like, it could be my kid that was sitting in that position.
Yeah.
Or it could be my kid that was sitting in that position. And either one of them, I would be there supporting them.
Yeah.
So I can't sit here in any judgment on any of it. It was a truly like enlightening moment. Yeah. And what was also happening at that time was I actually ended up interviewing, Dr. John DeMartini.
Yes. Yeah.
So he came on the Happiness Hunter podcast.
Oh, awesome.
And then So one day I'm interviewing this guy. He's like lives on this yacht, on this massive boat called the World Ship. He's got absolute freedom financially, emotionally, physically. He's actually just living life on his own terms, doing whatever he wants. World's his oyster, basically. So I'm with him like on the Tuesday afternoon, and then on the Wednesday morning, I'm in this courtroom while this guy gets handcuffed on and put into jail. And it was almost like I couldn't relate to how is it possible I can be like with one of the world's highest vibrating people in one moment and the next moment be with somebody who's just been incarcerated. It was like I am both those people, right? And it was like I just imploded inside. I was like, where do I sit on that spectrum of like the highest and the lowest of the human experience? It was quite an extraordinary experience personally for me.
That is incredible, Fiona. And I think I think this is the thing, right? Like when I talk about higher consciousness and things like that, from the school of thinking that I'm in, and even in the school of thinking that I've come through, like one of the rules is don't think that all right thinking is in your school, right? Like everything is, two things can be true at the same time and all that kind of stuff, right? But like from a higher conscious perspective, everything is perfect, right? Everything is perfect. It just is. And so it's only us with our values and everything else that place judgment on what experience is good, bad, or otherwise. And I think, there's a couple of things that come to mind about that. And I remember being at this event once and I was talking to this guy and he had a business and he was telling me about how, he's employed some people that have had like prison records and stuff like that. I'm going, okay. But he kind of made a point of it. Like it was, it's a big deal. Like, and I said to him, I'm like, okay, I'm like, I know plenty of people that have broken the law and they just never got caught.
Yeah.
Like what,
Exactly.
what's the difference, right? In that. And I think that's the thing. And the other thing about that, and I think this kind of relates to what you're saying, this kind of, this highest frequency of living and this, other experience. I remember this story that really stuck out to me when I was learning some of this quantum consciousness work. And I think it had come from a session that when people were doing, I don't know if you've ever heard of Michael Newton, who did all the like life between lives stuff. So anyway, his whole thing was like in between lives, we have this kind of council where we go, okay, we review our life or whatever and look at whatever life we're going to do and next and whatever and who we're connected with, all this kind of stuff. And they were doing the session and this one lady who was in session, she had this, like it's interactive with the person, and that she said, I had this experience, this lifetime where I was in a concentration camp. Right. And she goes, and like, I've had this lifetime. I knew it was going to be a short lifetime. And I'm having this review. And she said, yeah, I'm like reviewing my life. And, and they're like, okay, what is it? And she goes, well, my life hasn't been as bad as those over there. Right. And something along those lines. And they said, who are those people? And she said, the perpetrators, right? So the perpetrators that were in these concentration camps. And so it was essentially like from that perspective, it was going, even when we look at the roles, whatever perpetrators play, whatever, that there is a role that it plays. And what do people learn from that? Like what does that give people the ability to learn? I mean, could people learn forgiveness if there was nothing to forgive people for?
Yeah.
Could people learn compassion if they didn't have any opportunity? Could you learn there's so many things that for us to learn, we have to have some experience that facilitates that learning. So how do we say what is good, bad, right, wrong, otherwise, right? It comes back to that everything is perfect. It might not feel perfect at the moment, but there's always that higher purpose.
Yeah.
Mm.
On that note, that is a really lovely way to end it, because how can there be judgment when it is all perfect?
Yeah.
And just letting it go and allowing yourself to experience what is. And there's a deep acceptance in that, and there's such peace in that. Just, yeah, this is what it is.
Yeah. And it's knowing everything's perfect in the moment,
Yeah.
and you can choose something else.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can choose to think about it and look at it differently as well. Even that is the something else, just choosing the way, the perspective from which you're seeing it. Well, Toni, thank you so much for coming on this show. I actually really got a lot out of what you just finished off with there. So thank you for that. Now, where is the best place for our listeners to connect with you?
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm Toni Everard everywhere. My website's tonyeverard.com. I'm Toni Everard on LinkedIn, Instagram. And also I have the podcast, the Coaching Circle podcast with Toni Everard. And so, yeah, feel free to reach out to me on any of those platforms. And it's always me who responds. And I'll be happy to connect.
Lovely. Well, thanks again, Toni, for coming on the show. And hopefully it won't be quite so long until we catch up again ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Fiona. I love this project. And thank you for following your heart and your intuition and reaching out as well. It's been great.
Pleasure. Thanks, Toni. As this episode draws to a close, I just want to remind you that you are never alone. If today's episode resonated with you, if you found comfort, hope, or inspiration, I really do invite you to take a moment to reach out. You can connect with The Happiness Hunter on social media or at thehappinesshunter.com. Make sure you subscribe through your favourite podcatcher, leave a rating or a review to help others find this show, or you can simply share this episode with someone who might need to hear these words today. Together, we can spread hope, courage, and the unwavering belief that no matter how dark the night may seem, the light is always there too. Until next time, remember to embrace this light within you and let it guide you. And remember, you are never on your own.